Do you see a few words? It's not in me. It's just not in me. Right. Good evening, friends. Great to be here with you tonight. Feeling rather challenged by the title that Edward gave me a few weeks ago when he phoned to see if I could come out. We have an evening service each Sunday down in Whitthorn, and at the stage now we're fortunately got enough folks that can help out, so we actually went to the first half of the evening service in Whitthorn to dash down here, but that's part of the story, which is really encouraging that we do have folks that can help out with worship, and that there are, like yourselves here, folks that are coming out twice as they're sometimes known. I did have a laugh to myself just recently when Edward gave me this. The title I was given is actually How to Keep Going in the Christian Life, given that I've been in Whitthorn for a year or two now. I had to give somebody a reference just recently, and in the reference I've used a phrase that the person receiving the reference wasn't sure of, and he wrote back to me and he said, I noticed you said you've been in Whitthorn for 32 years. He said, you've actually been there longer than I've been alive. Does that make me feel ancient? Yeah. I've been in Whitthorn, Kirsten and I have been in Whitthorn for 32 years this August. 32 down and 3 to go, as they say. I don't know what the year is for, whether, I've had enough of you or we're finished with, so. 3 years to go this August before we stepped in from Whitthorn. When I moved to Whitthorn in 1990, my predecessor, because it was two churches brought together under one ministry, my predecessor Niall had been there for 35 years, and I thought, I've not got enough years to do the catching up on that one, but of course the government then changed the rules with regard to retirement, and I do have enough time to catch up with them. Been in Whitthorn and Niall and Glaston for, as I say, 32 years almost. A long ministry, I guess. And one of the things that has been an encouragement to myself was a visit a few years ago by the then moderator Albert Gogol. Folks heard of Albert Gogol? Yes? He came and he met with the ministers over in the Currie Hotel for an evening. And I remember Albert quite clearly saying that ministers tend to have a 30-year ministry, and so they'll have 3 different ministries in their lifetime of ministry. And he said, I've stayed in the one place but had 3 different ministries. And I really latched on to that because I got that. I thought, that's right. Very often the temptation is, when it's not going well, to just rush away and start again. And we've been there. I can remember in the early days, I was probably fairly strict about a lot of things, uncomfortably so perhaps, and I can remember around about 5 years into ministry I decided that I would have to deal with a policy that I was operating that was causing a bit of disturbance, shall we say, in the community. And Kirsty and I spoke about this at length, and I can remember Kirsty saying to me, well, there's 2 options. You can run away and start again, and just with a blank sheet and begin again, or you can go around the houses of the folks that you were offended and apologise to them and stay put here. And as you can see, I opted for plan B, and it wasn't easy. It was quite challenging to go and knock on doors of people that I knew I'd had disagreements with about theology and my practice of ministry, and some of them were very gracious, some of them were not so. But we move on with that. Now, when I was thinking about today, I thought it would be very easy just to talk about ministry and the almost 32 years that I've been in the area and how I've kept going in ministry during those 32 years. But that would be a failing on my part because, well, I guess that would only help Andy as a minister to keep going as a minister. And we've all got ministries here. We've all got a calling to exercise that ministry in different settings. And I guess what I want to do tonight is to open up the whole idea of persevering in the Christian faith. I'm not going to have one reading, I'm going to have a couple of readings through tonight. And the first reading, it says in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 13, this is from New King James Version, but he who endures to the end shall be saved. Jesus really speaking about endurance and about persevering, about keeping going and keeping going and keeping going again. the thoughts that I want to share with you tonight, I hope will help you to keep going, to keep persevering. I want to try and offer a proper Presbyterian presentation, so I've got 3 points, and they're all beginning with the letter P. I was quite impressed at that myself, actually. It happened that way. The first point I want to share would be that the P, first of all, would be for people. And in Hebrews chapter 10, the writer says, "Let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day of the Lord approaching." It's actually a very true word for today. As we start to come out of COVID, I don't know what's happening here, but I know that down in Whitehorn and Isle, you're seeing that 1 or 2 folks that were regularly in worship, they'll come back. They've found that the last 2 years with their own company has been perhaps attractive. The opportunities to go online and do worship are many now. We've all been in this steep learning curve. And I know that Edward and I have certainly shared our thoughts about how much you actually put out online and how much you hold back to just try and keep folks together. It's very easy to just sit at home in front of a screen now, perhaps more so than ever before. But the danger of that is this whole verse of neglecting the assembling of ourselves together. We need each other, actually. We need each other to keep going in our own particular ministries. We're supposed to be called to a body, and the body needs each part to keep going. My first point was about people. When we were interviewed for the job at Whitehorn and Glasgow now, and I say we because Kirsten and I were both interviewed, actually that's not allowed to happen now, but it did 32 years ago. The nominating committee obviously decided, well, he was better than the other Ian, so we'll go for him. But in actual fact, later on, one of the nominating committee said to me, "You know, Alec, the truth is, we didn't fancy you, it was Kirsty who wanted." And that's not changed any, actually, over 32 years. But, what that person was saying is what I believe is true. They got a package with Kirsty and I. When we came down here as a couple, a married couple, who wanted to commit themselves together to our work in the Lord's name. And we've done so over 32 years. I know that I would have left Whitehorn probably year 3 into the ministry if it hadn't been for my wife and the support of others. You know, it's a very wise thing. The Church of Scotland has a kind of unwritten law that says that ministers should really stay 5 years in their first charge. And really, the wisdom of that is that the first fallout that you have, you listening, mister? The first fallout that you have will be the time to just go, stuff you off, I've had enough, and walk away. But that actually wouldn't be shown on a thought of maturity. It wouldn't be much of a help to folk as you try and work through your challenges together. I can remember a very hard Currie session meeting after about 5 years. And we were still in the old manse in Whitehorn. If you know Whitehorn at all, the old manse is down behind the church. And as I walked down the road from my Currie session meeting in the church, there was tears in my eyes because I'd had enough. What was said was not very helpful, not very kind at all. And the way that it was said was malicious, actually. Unfortunately, at that time in the presbytery, there was a minister who was in charge of the under 5s. He looked after the play group. The first 5 years of ministry, if you had a problem, you went to this more senior minister. And I phoned him that night. And he said, "I'll be coming over in the morning." I said, "No, I just want to talk to you. I'll come over in the morning." And he did. He was true to his word. And I can remember him saying, "Tell me, do you believe that you were called to Whitehorn?" And I said, "I used to." I used to. And he said, "I'll ask the question again. Do you believe that you were called to Whitehorn?" And I said, "Yes, of course I do." And he said, "Do you believe that what happened last night up there and the person that was behind it, do you believe that she was called to do what she did?" And I said, "Yeah, you're right. She wasn't, of course she wasn't. Well, got on with the job, he said. And yeah, 32 years later, we're still here. Now, part of the reason that we're still here is that we've got a supportive fellowship. It's not just about Kirsty and I. We've got folks with different gifts who are prepared to play their part in the work down there. I'm sure you know, if you know Whitthorn at all, there are a number of things that we're involved in. We have a charity shop that helps to raise funds for ourselves and other charities. And that part of that was because we're time rich but money poor in Whitthorn. It's an impoverished community. You might not be aware of that up in rich and prosperous Newton Stewart. But Whitthorn is in the top 5% of depravity within, financial depravity within the whole of Dumfries and Galloway.
Not depraved.
No, not depraved, but deprived. It's an impoverished community. So the charity shop is where we've been allowed to generate an income for church work and for the support of others. And that's because people have got time. We focus on youth work. Kirsty runs Scripture Union when the schools allow that to happen. We try to do Boys Brigade, which we've opened to girls in recent years. And I guess one of the indicators of the support for that work from the wider fellowship has been the radical removal of pews.
Yeah.
Hey, who would have ever thought that in Whitthorn we were going to get away with it? We've taken out the centre pews and created a space which, well, Chris was just looking tonight, might even be as big as the flooring space here, which allows us, when the Boys Brigade Girls Association are in on a Thursday night, to play hockey, basketball, and all other sorts of things that the Sunday crowd would throw their hands up in horror at the very thought of in the sanctuary. But we're making the building multi-purpose. That's happened because folk have supported that and they see what we're trying to do. So people matter. A supportive fellowship and a partnership with Kirsty. Secondly, prayer. Romans chapter 15 and verse 30, Paul says, "Now I beg you, brethren, through the Lord Jesus Christ and through the love of the Spirit, that you strive together with me in prayers to God for me." Prayer is fundamental to the work of ministry together, and the prayers of the saints will succeed in God's work being done. Andy said that part of my remit, I guess, was to speak about the highs and lows of 32 years as minister in the South Machars. I guess for those of you who've been here for a number of years will know that there was a particular chapter that will, I guess, mark out our ministry in Whitthorn when it comes to a close. And that would, of course, be in 2000 when the Solway Harvester was lost. It's the hardest year or so of our lives, I guess. And I say of our lives because it affected us as a family greatly as we tried to, in a sense, just soak up the grief that our whole community felt at the loss of 7 young lives. By that time we'd been in Whitthorn for 10 years. I had conducted the wedding of the skipper's brother. I had baptised his first child. His wife, if she had waited 2 hours, would have aided in the birth of our second son. And so there was an intimacy about the contact with these families. Half of the boys, at least, had been through the Boys Brigade with me. I knew them when they were rogues and rascals, but I knew them when they were earning enough money in these boats to put a down payment on their first home. One of them engaged to be married, and so on and so on. The Solway Harvester was a time of real challenge in terms of the ministry in Whitthorn. But what kept us going was the prayers of the saints. Prayers from literally all over the world kept us through that. I can remember the Saturday night before, what was lost at sea on the Monday, and the Saturday night before the Sunday morning service, which was going to be covered by national television, etc. You could escape me from that ceiling and some. The good friends that come up here and watch me sneak away and get back to Whitthorn because she wasn't going to be cooking because she'd enough to do with the sore ear that she had from answering the phone from the several hundred calls. Practical support of ourselves at a time of real challenge. But the prayers of folks far and near, I'm convinced is what got me through personally the hardest of times in the ministry. People, prayer, and finally for tonight you'll be pleased to hear purpose. In Mark 16 and verses 15 and 16 we read, and he said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. He who believes and is baptized will be saved, but he who does not believe will be condemned. We've got good news, friends, and this world needs good news even more today than ever before. Before going into the ministry, I worked with homeless folks in Glasgow. I worked with the Church of Scotland as a ran a night shelter for homeless folk, and a lot of, I guess, my thinking in terms of ministry would be formed during the 5 years that I worked alongside the homeless community of the city. I remember a preacher saying that the gospel is best described as one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread. You heard that one? It just encapsulates our role and our responsibility. And I guess for myself, I can see it written large in the years that I had in Glasgow with the homeless, because sure as guns, if the lodging house mission had got cakes and buns donated on a Thursday night, you could guarantee there'd be 100 guys outside the door of the lodging house mission waiting for those buns and cakes. And if there was a free handout somewhere else, you could guarantee there would be a lengthy queue, because one beggar told another beggar where to find bread. And I guess that ultimately is our responsibility, friends. We're beggars. We're in need of mercy from God. But we've found that mercy and that grace in Jesus Christ. And so we are called to go as beggars, telling other beggars where to find bread.